We'll do it.
All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, June the 2nd, 2020, and Tiki and I are really happy that you are here, either in present mode with us right now, or for those of you that'll be watching the replay. We just want to encourage you too that you are more than welcome to invite other members of your team or other people that you feel like the content that Tiki and I will be sharing throughout the next couple of weeks. And then when we do our third sessions, please feel free to share this out anytime that you see it and invite people in. We also want to acknowledge, where we are in our present day right now, and to know that we're here. If there's other things that you want to share and talk about, Tiki and I are here for you. And so today's conversation is going to be centered around restructuring people and capabilities. And this is dedicated towards, as we move forward in our COVID present status. And so Tiki and I are going to talk a little bit more today because we really want to give you some really great tools, resources, and information. And then we'll have an opportunity to kind of do some deep dives later. So for those of you that may not know me well, my name is Allison Nail-Malone of Malone Consultants Groups, where we think, be, and do leadership differently. And so Tiki, I'll hand over this to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Allison, I just want to officially go on record to say, I really appreciate the partnership and the support and just the mental, exchange that we've had in this process. And it is a very challenging time. I was thinking Sunday night, one of our clients reached out and I was like, COVID, now this. And so respectfully understand that people are at different places in their journey. And really, as America, we're going through this together. And it goes just beyond what we're seeing in COVID, what we're seeing with just some of the racial challenges. It's our economy. It's just so many things that as a people that we all have to deal with together. So I appreciate that. So for those of you just joining, I'm so glad to be here today. And, I am the senior partner and managing director at a company called HR & Co. And so we are end-to-end human resources. We embrace people chaos. And our goal is really to help HR practitioners or their organizations deliver the best with their people. And so every opportunity we get to partner, to collaborate, to design, build, execute, that's what we want to do. And so today, as we talk about the what and the how, or the why and the how of restructuring people and capabilities, I will tell you in the marketplace today, there is going to be a major demand and shift in how we actually engage talent to do the next iteration of work. And this just goes beyond the 6 feet of distancing and restructuring our physical workspaces, our teleworkspaces. As leaders and as practitioners, we're going to have to basically ourselves and think about how do we help the business bring talent forward. And so today, unlike many other sessions, I'm actually going to give you some meat on the plate, not that I haven't before, but to really talk about some of the innovative ideas and thought leadership we're seeing in market. So I'm not going to be a spoiler alert. Again, if you want to add your email address to chat, feel free to do so. We'll send you the official summary. If you have questions, please ask us. Take yourself off mute. It's an intimate group, or put it in the chat. And if there's something that we can do offline to help you, or to brainstorm, or to just share an idea, to listen, please allow us to be your partner, because this is our way of giving back, because we care about what happens with you as a leader, but also what happens with people in your organization. So with that being said, we have 45 minutes on the calendar. We want to respect your time. So Allison, let's go to work.
Yeah. So as many of you have attended in the past, we really like to engage you. And we just have one question today where we'd love to just get some information about feedback from you. And the way that we do this is that we utilize a tool called Poll Everywhere. And for those of you, this is a great resource to be able to use to kind of check the pulse of your people, of your team. There's a free portion of it that lets you use up to 25 users. And then of course, more than that, there's a cost to it. But I find that it's been a really great tool in all the digital workshops and digital conversations that I've had to really create the pulse. And the way that you do that is on your phone, you can send a text message to 22333. So go ahead and get your phone out, or go ahead and get another web browser up. You don't have to download anything. So on your phone, just text 22333. In the place where you would send a response, put Allison and 677. 677. That should be 2 sevens there. And then get ready for your response. And this is just going to be an A, B, C, or D response. So our first question today is, when you think about from the moment that things started to shift for COVID, a lot of restructuring, a lot of changes have happened. And so we're kind of curious, like, how many times in the way that you interpret that change or reorg, how many times has that happened since the beginning of COVID? We don't really plan to do any reorgs or structuring, and we don't plan to, none, but we're actually thinking about it. C, well, we've done it at least once, D, at least twice, or 3 or more times. And Tiki and I have had clients that fit all of these categories here. So we'd like to just kind of know where you're at right now. With my team, my specific team, we've actually restructured twice since we started. So we've had to think about strategically, how do we best serve our clients? And also, more importantly, like those that work with Malone Consultants Group and our clients, how do we best serve them as humans? So several of you have already started to respond. I can see, so 100% so far of those have responded has said at least once. So you can text this to 22333 or respond through a web browser. And what this does is help Tiki and I kind of adjust or pivot our content right now to best serve what's happening in your space right now. So I'll just give it a couple of more seconds before I lock the responses. Okay, I'll go ahead and lock this now. So it looks like majority of you, there's a good majority of you that did respond that have at least once done some restructuring. So in our conversations I'm sorry, Tiki, did you want to add anything?
No.
Okay, cool. So throughout our times, we always want to talk about the leadership mindset and the processes for these different changes, initiatives, things and moving forward for our organizations and teams. So I'm here to talk a little bit briefly about the leadership mindset. Probably none of this will be new to you, but we just kind of want to bring it back to the table. And then Tiki's going to dive into the meat of our conversation today. And so I really want to talk about the leadership mindset, that if you could embrace this as an adventure in a way where you get the opportunity to really create some impact for your team, for your organization, and it has a ripple effect to your communities and beyond. And so research has shown, and I'm currently in a research program that identifies best ways to move teams forward in the future. And this research group has shown over and over the course of 10 years that these are the 4 main capabilities, characteristics of leaders who successfully move their teams forward, especially in times of crises. And this is compassion, courage, curiosity, and connectedness. So, as you know, we are full steam ahead, and we've already had some phased approaches already kicked off, and there's still organizations who are kind of waiting till mid-June to the end of July before returning to the workplace. So I think it's safe to say that we aren't going to be living in a quote-unquote post-COVID world anytime soon. So what if we shifted our mindset to how can we live and lead by embracing and embarking this as a new adventure? I'm sure many of you had the opportunity to see last week SpaceX that took a large leap to something that felt somewhat familiar, but still all new ways of thinking, driving decisions, and taking calculated risks with future forward strategies with contingencies for the possibility of failure. And they are the first The first time they went, it was a no-go decision in the last 15 minutes before lunch. And that's kind of how I see this next phase of return to the workplace. Eventually, they did get the launch off, but everybody was really nervous, and it was a calculated risk. And so that first characteristic is the compassionate leadership. Navigating times of crisis is one of the greatest challenges that leaders face. And today, leaders face a multitude of interrelated systemic crises, from the climate change to our current stance right now to, of course, COVID. And in all areas, this is a demonstration of low trust and broken social contracts in many parts of our world. This requires a different approach to our leadership, one that places humanity at its heart. Now more than ever, us as leaders must do everything in our power to protect the health and safety, and that's both physically and mentally, of our employees, our customers, and our communities. These times call for us to tap into our empathy and stand in solidarity. We can't always predict the challenges we face in life or in our businesses, but we can determine the type of leaders we want to be in situations like this when they arise. Moments of uncertainty and big challenges call for real leaders to show up and ask, who do we choose to be now? The decisions that we make now determine the future for generations to come. We need to purposely be driven and have principled leadership inside and outside of our organizations. And so these kinds of turbulent times call for us to be bold and be brave and respond to the urgency of the moment with creative and compassionate solutions. They also call for us to collaborate widely between businesses, government, civil societies to come up with long-term and inclusive solutions for the future that we want and need. And with the well-being of people as our priority, we can transform the way that we do leadership, we can transform the way that we do business and design our economies to again allow for shared prosperity for all. Examples of compassionate leadership include the organization like Salesforce. They pledge to continue to pay their hourly service providers even as they're increasingly unable to come into the workplace. Salesforce also donated $1.5 million to San Francisco's Give to SF, which is their to be able to support vulnerable people and local businesses during this time. And then Chobani, which I love their yogurt. Chobani has partnered with New York's governor and Feeding America Westchester and the National Guard to deliver meals to family in need. Courageous leadership is said that when crises happen, real leaders emerge. Mm-hmm. Author David Forrest Wallace wrote that real leaders are people who help us overcome our limitations of our own individual, I wouldn't necessarily say, in his terms, he says lazy and selfishness, but I interpret that as kind of a blindness. And we get to do things better and the harder things that we can do ourselves and to do on our own. So a courageous leadership mindset acknowledges people's fears and then encourages us to resolve. FDR, one of the former US presidents, stated, there is no unsolvable problem if we face it wisely and courageously. And there are many in which it can be helped, but it can never be helped merely by just talking about it. We must act and act quickly. So your job as a leader today is to provide both brutal honesty, a clear accounting of the challenges of your locality, your company, or what your team faces, and credible hope that collectively you and your people in the organization have the resources that are needed to meet the threats that you face each day. This is determination, solidarity, strength, a shared purpose, humanity, kindness, and resilience. Recognize that most of your employees are anxious right now. They're anxious about their health, their finances, in many cases, their jobs. So explain that you understand how scary they probably feel right now and how things feel right now, and that you both can work together to weather these storms. Curiosity leadership, or curious leadership. It's cultivating curiosity during these next phases of crisis and of these COVID transitions. It's crucial to your success as a leader and a decision maker, but it also strengthens your team and their commitment. Many crisis management tools are designed to help in the first phases of crisis, to create an ordered process that helps sift the critical signals from the noise. For example, first responders of all types use these kinds of approaches to gather information on what's happening, create clarity about who's doing what, who's communicating what, and to do that quickly. And they rely on things like checklists and systems to create coordinated response to crisis. However, now it's time to act. It's easy for us to kind of lose track of one of the most essential skills in these moments. And that is to say, with confidence, we don't know. I don't know. And this is one of the ways heroic leaders can kind of stumble and kind of create some chaotic domains when they pretend like they know. And it can be hard for someone who's striving to lead heroically to be visibly unsure. And it can be hard to be decisive when admitting to yourself how unsure you are. And when you are clear about uncertainty, it's vital that we notice these uncertainties. And it's hard to be able to scrutinize and learn from what's happening and to adapt these decisions and plans when we don't acknowledge it. And when we acknowledge it, we create those systems and processes, and then we act. So one way to remain open to what is unknown is to think about the complex systems you're operating in and to try them to see it as a system at multiple levels. In these times, it's helpful to have a set of questions that help us increase not just yours, but your group's situational awareness. For example, I find it really helpful to ask questions like, what patterns am I noticing right now? What are the forces or elements that contribute to creating those patterns? How might people act differently than we might expect or hope? What is happening for me? How do I feel? How is that shaping my responses? What are we collectively, or what am I not seeing? And so seeing the patterns that are emerging now and looking for the factors that catalyze these patterns also helps us to start the process of looking out for the beginnings of what might be next. And so modeling connectedness, which is our last one, modeling our connectedness as a leader is a leadership trait associated to building and sustaining relationships. It also points to boosting the esteem of others. The connected leader seeks ways to help others develop both personally and professionally during this time. And leaders who score high on the connectedness dimension might, during this time, coach and still develop others, engage in skill practice sessions with others, so brainstorm and role play with each other. Lead when you have to, because I know a lot of organizations happen to be doing performance appraisals right now.
Mm-hmm.
So find that appropriate balance between the objectives and goals and the competencies and behaviors, and make sure that you're giving that feedback in a timely basis and not waiting. And then identify and continue to grow your high potential people. And most importantly, make sure that you're building those deeper relationships with each other and making decisions that all employees have better opportunities to have a real impact in their organizations, particularly during this time. So I'm just going to pause here before Tiki dives in, and then I'd like to hear if any of you have any questions, any thoughts, any considerations. I'd love to just hear from you before we kind of move into our next section. And you can either do this, just unmute yourself, or write it in the chat. Okay, I don't see anybody typing or anyone coming on. So Tiki, if you want to go ahead and dive in and just let me know when you're ready to change the slide, and I'll do it.
Yes, so thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, so we've talked about leadership, and just so you know, foundationally, we have to always start with that point of view and perspective, because everything that we do regardless of what process, what checklists that Allison mentioned, checklists and systems, or just basically how we become visible and communicate, it is really critical. So once we've kind of got our leadership bearing and we understand how we want to show up, it really comes down to the process. And as we think about where we are and where we're going, I cannot overemphasize from the literature I'm reading, from what we're seeing with clients, from what we actually knew coming into the beginning of the year. As practitioners, we're going to have to do something different to help the business identify talent, develop that talent, and actually have that talent be proficient for the multiple shifting things that we see in the organization. It's interesting, a couple of weeks ago, we were meeting with one of our clients talking about leadership, norming, storming, forming, and performing. And I just said to that group, they work for a company that is innovating, they're entrepreneurs, so they're going to always be forming or getting there. And norming and performing is really off the chart because there's so many things that will evolve and change as they kind of reach their new norm. So as we go through the process, I want to set the tone and tenor for some of this. So early part of this year, Alice and I had a great opportunity to do some market research. So some of this you're going to see, and it's really around talent optimization and really how do we predict talent of the future, and how do we use this predictive analytics in order to help organizations move forward. I'm just going to say right now, this is not a sales pitch. If you want to know something about it, we'll tell you. But the insights, the expertise, and the systems, we have never seen this in HR before and talent before, and how it's going to help save cost and proficiency. As a 20-year practitioner, I've been blown away. And so I want to bring some of that insight to the conversation today because it's going to be critical to set your thinking on how you do things different, how you actually design talent and people strategies in your organization different now more so than ever. And so as we walk through this, again, it's more context setting for you to start thinking. And if you want to know something more later, let's do it. So number one, you have to understand the problem behind the pain. And the problems behind the pain have changed. As recent as the events that happened over the last couple of days, even when we talk about inclusion and diversity, the problem behind the pain has changed. And the way that we've managed things before, the way teams are organized, what teams need, the economic, there are so many things that's just changing the dynamic beyond let's just show up and go to work. And so we need to be able to help business leaders understand what's the problem we're trying to solve, what are barriers to do that or successes, and then how do we design something new. And you've heard me say this before, we cannot solve something if we don't know the problem. So let's go forward. So the first thing as we're walking through this, there is a systematic step, and Allison, if you advance for me, please. So you cannot transform something you don't understand. If you don't know and understand what the current state of the customer experience is, and in this case, we're talking about employees or talent, how can you possibly design the desired future state? And so it goes beyond just doing surveys. It just goes beyond just asking people questions, thinking because people are showing up on their Zoom meetings every day that they're connected. We have to go deeper to be able to do that. So one of the things I'm going to talk a little bit about, and this is really an idea on how to help the business do that. First, you have to know the business strategy. And if leaders are not talking about their business strategy, and if you are an HR practitioner or business leader or owner, founder, people can't help you solve the problem if they do not know what it is. And so we have to start there. Then we have to design what are the new strategic priorities and the people that can help us get it done. And as I mentioned in our last call, maybe we went into COVID or this situation innovating, and now we need to stabilize. Maybe we went into this situation saying our go-to-market product was this, and now it's changed because something has emerged as a part of this experience that we're facing. And so design is so important to unpack, but also to make sure that all leaders, employees, managers, whatever your org structure looks like, understand the vision that we are moving towards. We cannot be operating under the old agenda that we may have started at the end of last year or even at the beginning of this year. Um, the second thing is inspire. Jobs may be changing. I've worked for many companies that said, hey, you can never work from home and we work in the box and that's it. But the reality is a major event like this has changed what we're actually able to do and what those capabilities are. And as practitioners, we need to be getting under the cover that says, how do we look at spans and layers and the types of role? Do we need to rewrite them? How do we have handoffs or workflows? I mean, there's so many things. If you're a production organization versus a service firm, it's changing what we need to do and helping to have those actual jobs evolve. And what I mean by that, there's an actual new description. There's a new set of capabilities or talent that you're looking for. It doesn't discard the people in your organization that you have today, because you may be able to upskill, transfer skills, all of that. And so that's why you cannot ever pigeonhole someone or minimize their efforts, because Tiki may have had 10 years of banking experience before she came to this role, that at the time she didn't need it, but you can pull it forward. And so you want to think about that. How do we hire to these new capabilities? Whether you're doing that internally or externally, if you have these new capabilities, how do you hire and get to speed of hire and proficiency really fast? And then really, how do you make sure that you don't have hot spots in your organization? And this is the typical kind of engagement where you're constantly tracking to get to results. It is a staggered step, but it's also a straight line. It's the business strategy, what I call the stuff in the middle, to drive business results. And all the stuff in the middle is really, how do we optimize talent to help the business get there? Next slide, please. So let me just run through a couple of things. So number one, step one, you need to listen to what the business is saying today. If you don't have your listening ears on and understanding what are some of the current business challenges, is it the sales in slump? Is it leadership? Is it a change in market? Is it a skill gap? We need to understand, and you need to be directly asking your leaders, what are you saying today that you're going to need for the future? And begin to understand, what does that mean from a strategic perspective? What does it mean from a talent perspective, key roles, succession plan, hire, whatever? And then how do we measure if we're making progress? This is just one example of some of the things that our clients are telling us around what are some of their common business challenges. And again, I've highlighted some of the blue ones that we're hearing now more than ever. And what's not on the page here is that some employees may not even come back to work for many circumstances. Some have passed away. Some have decided to reprioritize their lives and spend time with their families. Some have now become a single parent household. I mean, there are so many dynamics why your workforce may be shifting and changing. So you have to understand what the business is saying today and what does that mean for your talent, and begin to build a blueprint that's going to help you work through that. Next slide. Number two, you need to understand the problem you need to solve to help the business. You need to help the business solve. And so sometimes as HR practitioner, we're like, oh, it's D&I, oh, it's hiring. And we get very scrambled on what it is. Be clear about what you need to be doing to help the business solve their problem. And from a talent perspective, if we go to hire to retire, there's so much in the middle, and you need to pick the top priorities. When we've asked some CEOs, and this is some of the literature that we have the advantage of looking at some of the predictive index research, CEOs are saying strategy development, strategies are changing 39%. Right after strategy is the talent to get that strategy done, then the operational execution of that, and then that constant alignment. But alignment comes last. So goal alignment and, prioritize goals. It's like, what's the strategy? Who do we have to deliver? And how do we operate or execute that? And so if you don't see on this blueprint that the role that we play as practitioners are so important to help execute that strategy, that stuff in the middle, then you're going to kind of miss the mark. So ask what you're trying to solve as relates to that. Number three, where in the people cycle can you drive immediate value and impact? So is it that design? helping individuals to understand that strategy and getting leaders on board and making sure you have the right butts in the seats? Is it saying now we need to go to market internally or externally to look at hiring the talent? We've restructured the jobs. We know what capabilities we need in order to do that. Is it inspiring, looking at managers and leaders a different way to upskill them and to get them to a place that they need to be? Or is it this constantly thing just taking feedback? Where in the people cycle can you drive the most immediate value and impact based upon what the business is saying, and have your teams or you focus specifically on that? Next slide. Number 4, what resources and tools do you need to enable and optimize now and in the future? And one of the things that's really good about the predictive index or some of the tools is that we can actually predict the talent that you have that's going to match the business strategy. And I'm going to show this to you. So there's kind of these 4 quadrants that they kind of look at. Are you exploring? You're an innovative, you're agility, you're doing some cool, sexy, neat things. Or is it cultivating? You're trying to stabilize your workforce, your team, the employee experience, so that you can have that shareholder value or that NPS score. Are you stabilizing your processes, your procedures? Things need to change. Or are you producing? You're looking at results and a discipline. Each organization will sit different in this wheel, and the leaders that you need to drive these specific strategies forward will help create proficiency and speed to business results. And you need to know the leaders who are capable of actually doing that. And there's some tools out there that can help you do that. Next slide. So let me just kind of give you an example. What are you tasking teams to do? So if we go back to that business strategy, and now we have insights around some of the talent, we can now begin to plot where we actually have people who can be successful. So if you think about taking your succession plan or your hiring plan or your workforce plan to the next level, what if I could tell you Jane, Jim, and Joe are really process people, but now we're in a mode around innovation? Doesn't mean that they're not good leaders, but should they be leading the charge? And if you have natural people who that we can predict that could do that, think about how fast you could have that career conversation, make the switch in your talent, and get leaders on board that can actually help you deliver in the short run, in the long run, what you're trying to accomplish. And making talent more mobile, which we've been talking about for a long time, to adjust as the business strategy adjusts. So what are you tasking teams to do? And do you know if you have leaders that can execute against that? This is not about behaviors or personality or I like tiki. This is about saying who will be successful and how can you predict that? And there are tools out there that can help you come to the table strategically and say, this is where you say you're going. Here are the 5 people that we know can help you get there. This is what we need to do to shift immediately. Next slide, please. So again, what are we tasking the team to do? So this is another example. Our strategy now is on people and process, but our leaders are still over here in innovation and agility. You can begin to see the mismatch in why you may be slowing down or not able to execute the strategies that you need. Again, this has nothing to do with experience and skills. This has to do with performance and behaviors and how people naturally work in order to get their work done. So this, I just want to show you this visual. If you go back one more slide, just one more, Allison. Just want to show you this visual, like what's the strategy? Who's the talent? How do we execute? What's the strategy? We can change this tomorrow. Strategy changes tomorrow. We can populate it. Now, who's the talent? Think about the speed to that discussion and not just saying we had to go through stale dated 9-box or talent review data or resume or an old performance review. We can actually be real time in helping the business think through those decisions. Next slide, please. Step number 5, how can you leverage predictive insights to drive the future organizational dynamic? So if we take that same kind of dynamic and just kind of blow it up to this unpacking the culture and the microculture, imagine if you're having a discussion, we understand what the strategy team is, where leaders sit. We can now enter into a strategic discussion around how do we use these predictive insights in order to help the organization become more dynamic and shift create that agility to do that. And so if you look at this, this is an example of a startup company where the leaders were mostly in the exploring, innovative agility, and the engineering team was more so in the kind of process and precision. And based upon that company, that may have been the right culture or the microculture in order to achieve their business strategy. As you can see, there's not a bunch of leaders and teamwork and employee experience. So what does that mean for some of your engagement results or who's watching employees? You need to understand and be able to leverage these insights and be able to understand what are the trade-offs. And if you can predict this better, you're actually able to help. We walked into a meeting today, the window just fell out, the CEO or your leaders ask you for something, great. What are those strategic points? You know what, Jane, Jim, and Joe or Tiki, whoever, Robert would be better. What do we need to do to get them on this project in order to stem revenue leakage, in order to bring shareholder value, and ultimately stabilize the company for whatever mission you're on at that time? So again, this is just an example, but how can you use the insights that you have, whether you don't have this, in order to help drive the future organizational dynamic? Step 6. So bottom line on top, and you guys always will hear me say this, you want to drive solutions that will allow the business to organize and deliver results. We cannot come to the table in a time like this and not have that deeper level. We cannot bring the same strategies, the same leadership conversation. I was just talking to an organization yesterday about leadership. I'm like, people can't just show up to class anymore. It has to be a dynamic 2 to 3 step. They have a course, they have a coach, they have an action learning, they have something that ties back to business results. We can't just say, you showed up for 30 minutes, we taught you something new, and there's no application. There's no relevance to that. There's no taking it down to the individual team and organizational level. If we do, we're going to miss it. So make sure that you are coming to the table prepared to drive results that will allow the business to organize and deliver results. What is the problem? If you don't understand the problem, you're going to miss giving the right solutions, and you're going to show up to the table not looking very prepared. Your question is, what people solution do we need to deploy? What part in the value chain, the food chain, what insights, tools, if you don't have them, get them. If you can't afford a system, let's talk about what do you do have and how do we create predictive insights, leading, lagging, predictive, and pull that together to have a strategic conversation, because it's there. The data, I think there was a comment yesterday, the president of Ariel Investment said, numbers don't lie. So make sure that you have your insights and data, because it will tell you directionally where you're going. And then how do we help the business reorganize and drive results? Is it hire, internal, external? Is it develop? Do we need to look at managers or colleagues or new roles or skills or capabilities? Or do we need to engage? Is it the way we treat our teams and create an employee experience different? And how do you equip managers in this new world to be able to be inclusive, to understand the skills of their team, to be able to rotate people, to keep talent more mobile? We have to teach them how to do that, because in the past we've hired people who were good doers and may have lacked people skills, and that's okay. We had the trade-off. But even now, just dealing with some of the emotional components of the people leader role, the family dynamics, what do you do and don't ask, and how do you create this culture in a virtual environment? Our people leaders need more support now than ever, and you have to be able to give that. So I want you to know that leadership is a component, but how we act now is going to drive the next 2 quarters of the year, and our leaders are going to need us to help them stabilize and accelerate in a way that we've never been asked before, and we cannot come to the table with the same playbook. And so those are the things that I want to say, and I don't know if I had one more slide after that, Allison. So those are the things that I have to say. I know it's a lot. I've tried to keep it simple in a 6-step process. There will be some homework and things that you need to do if you're an independent leader or with your team, to go back through those questions and put them up on your board. What's the problem? How do we help the business solve it? Let's execute. What tools do we need to do it? And if you're constantly on that talk track with your team, all of the other stuff will fade away because you'll be laser focused on helping the business be successful. That's what I have, and that's the conversation that we're having today. So let me pause here, see if there's any questions, comments, concerns, anything that you're hearing in your business that we can help you unpack before the last 3 minutes of this call.
So you are welcome to just unmute yourself, or if it's more comfortable for you to do in the chat, feel free to do that too. This is where we would love to have a conversation with you. This is great to have content and information to take away, but also to be able to integrate it in a way. We also know that some of you are processors, and so if you need to go process it and then reach back out, here are our emails. We'll also be sending a recording of this to each of you for those of you who attended, or for those that you have reached out previously and said that you wanted this content if you were unable to attend. So I'd love to just hear your thoughts, any questions, or someone put in here that a couple of slides ago was a really powerful visual to see where your teams land, and where might be some of the gaps, especially if you're dealing with a particular situation. So this is a great time to unmute yourself, or put in the chat any questions or thoughts or ahas that you've had.
Yeah, so now I'll just add to that. I tend to be a visual person, so seeing that visually helps me see where those gaps are. It's one thing to speak through them intellectually and say, well, I feel like we're probably focusing here, and maybe we have gaps here, but to see it visually like that really helps me to kind of put it into context, I suppose, and see, is that okay? Is that where I want our leadership to be spending the time, or do we need to start kind of transitioning? Maybe we've got that particular area pretty well taken care of and covered, and now we can kind of start moving resources and time and energy to some of the other areas that need some focus next. So that was very very useful for me.
Thanks, Tim. We really appreciate it. And I will tell you, if you have tasked a leader to perform a task that's not a part of their natural DNA, they can become very exhausted and burn out very fast. And so you may need to know that. And so you could say, Tiki is going to be a stretch. And I know this is not, but this is how you can help. But always also watching to avoid that engagement or burnout factor, because you know that employee is stretching and that you've made the trade-off to make that decision. So it even gives you that level of predictive insights to be able to understand what that tail may look like as you're going forward.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Tiki.
Good. Absolutely. Thank you for your feedback.
I think it also allows organizations too. A lot of organizations can't hire people right now, just not able to. And so to kind of piggyback on what you were saying too, like who else could you pull in that maybe for a short period of time that fits in those skills of, like, in that example, like who else in the organization or who else on the larger team could step in and support in a way, or who else could you pull in that could step and support in the people engagement or on the talent optimization piece.
Okay. Well, guys, we're here. We want to help you and support you. We appreciate the feedback. Keep coming. As we go to market and get more industry insights and research, we want to bring it here to you first, and this is a forum for you, and we want to make sure that we constantly give back. So I think we're right at time. Allison, over you to close.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. And as I mentioned earlier, you'll have access to this content within the next 24 to 48 hours. You'll get a copy of the slides and this recording, and then some additional notes of things that we've been talking about. And as always, as you process this information, as you're having conversations, or even if you're preparing to have conversations, this is where you could really utilize Tiki's team, my team, our team collectively to really help support you. And some of those resources that we're able to provide you are complimentary, and we're open to talk about those, moving forward. If you are more curious and would like to have more information about predictive index, Tiki is our expert in that space, and so feel free to reach out to her, or reach out to me, and I'll make sure that you get in contact with her as well. So thank you so much for being here. We wish you to be well, and thank you for showing up for yourself, for your organization, and for our communities.
Yep. See you
All
guys
right,
next
everyone,
week.
thank you. See you next week at 9 o'clock Central
Thank
Time.
you.
Bye.